Welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore the Gemini super full moon across the 4th or the 5th of December at 13 degrees and 3 minutes, also known as the cold moon. I'm going to share with you the exact timings for all the major cities in the world shortly, but Gemini, the host, is the third zodiac sign. It's an air sign, so very much about cool communication, and it's also mutable, very much to do with flexibility. The moon, however, is much more to do with our senses, our emotions, security, and the host, Gemini, doesn't really know what to do with the moon, to be honest. It's known as being in peregrine, so not forging an essential dignity here at all. However, the moon in Gemini is something we can work on. We all have conversations and interactions with people that are quite fast, and the moon is just asking us to slow it down a little bit and be rather more mindful of what our real feelings are underneath those sparkling and vivacious interactions. If you do have the moon in Gemini, or you know anyone with the moon in the 3rd house, they're likely to be someone who has a lot of pizzazz, but also that vibrant personality can give them a love of very stimulating interactions. But we need to be mindful of the wider astrological influences, how they're feeding into this event, which makes this unique full moon different to any other. And there is a major influence that comes from the nodal axis. The south node is very much to do with our habitual reactions, is in the practical Virgo. The north node, the direction of travel collectively, if not consciously for us all, is in the more spiritual Pisces. So over the next couple of weeks, whether we're talking about the Christmas arrangements, we're travelling, a contract, anything to do with our interactions with people in our everyday world, and also siblings, neighbours, and our work with technology, even our personal use of technology, just staying in touch with our instincts can help us not to be too rash in how we work with others. I'm going to share with you the event chart from a solar but also natal viewpoint to give you a deeper dive into the framework of this, and along with those timings of all the major cities of the world, I'll then go through each of the 12 signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you a flavour of what you can look forward to over the next 2 weeks in terms of your ascendant, sun or moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. A very warm welcome. I have been sharing recently that over 50% of people who regularly watch my videos are not subscribers. If that's you, please help the channel to continue to thrive. We've crashed through the 133k mark. It'd be great to get to 134 soon. But also your views, comments and likes are all truly appreciated. I really do thank you for them. Year 2026 is racing up. If you've yet to watch your deep dive video for your zodiac sign or my overview for us all collectively, please see the link below for more. So this event occurs at 11:13 p.m. based on Universal Time and Greenwich and the Prime Meridian, but on the screen now I'm just sharing those major cities across the world. So 13 degrees in Gemini is the second decan of Gemini, which is sub-ruled by Venus, the relator, but also very much to do with money. But I think because the host, Gemini, is very much to do with fast communication, what Venus here is asking us to do is just be mindful that charm and diplomacy have their place. But what about the role of the ruler of the sign of Gemini, Mercury? So on the screen now I'm showing the solar event chart. There's Mercury in the sign of Scorpio. Mercury here can be very perceptive. It's much less concerned with the apparent information that's shared with us. It's about diving deep, doing our research. So if you are thinking about buying a new mode of transport, entirely possible with the Sun, Venus and Mars in Sagittarius, or going on an exotic overseas holiday, planning a big purchase, doing your research really astutely is going to be key, and Mercury can help you because it's linking in a very potent way to Saturn in the sign of Pisces. So really getting beneath what's presented to us can help you to make a much more informed decision. What's much more challenging on this particular full moon is Mars. It's moved on in the sign of Sagittarius. The sun's not going to catch up with it this year, but if you look at Mars, that's actually coming into a conflicting right angle to Saturn, so it's applying towards the end of this week and into the start of next week in a very testing way, which can create a lot of resistance, a lot of tension. If we think the energy of Pisces, where we also have the North Node in an exact T-square along with the South Node to the position of the Moon and the Sun, if we think that Pisces energy is what we don't always see, it can be our subconscious, it can be what we're unaware of, can in traditional astrology be about secret enemies. We just need to be conscious that that role of the position of Saturn to Mars, however much that Sagittarius energy wants to really go for it in a very adventurous and exciting way, and the Moon in Gemini is about how we think and how we feel about the conversations we're having, Saturn just suggests that we do really not rush anything that's vitally important. But what about that nodal axis? You can see at 1343 to the Sun at 13 and the Moon at 1303. It's so close. So I feel whatever we're talking about, whoever we're discussing things, the conversations we're having in general, all very Gemini. The Moon, we need to get in touch with how we feel, so not be too quick to the point of even accidentally being somewhat superficial. What the North Node in particular, Point of Destiny, is asking us to do is just follow our instincts. So whatever our mind may be urging us to grapple with in a very logical way, and the urgency that comes from certainly the Sun and Mars being in Sagittarius because they're very impatient, while the North Node and Saturn are asking us to just slow it down. How does it feel? And Mercury informed in the mix to doing the analysis. And if we do that analysis, it can be very protective, because if we are discussing something in a bit more of a flippant, fast, not well thought out way, it could be that we end up agreeing to something or connecting with someone that's not actually going to be very good for us at all. Now on the screen now I'm showing the event chart from a natal perspective based on Greenwich, the prime meridian and universal time. The reason I use Greenwich is I think wherever we are in the world we can relate to the event based on this. You know, obviously some astrologers, if they're based on the East Coast, the West Coast, in Germany, Australia, they could do charts based on where they're located, but this is at the heart of time, Greenwich, and that's why I think it's quite compelling. And you can see the Moon is actually very visible, the 10th house. And when we have the Moon in the 10th house, it gets much more difficult to disguise how we feel. Those thoughts and emotions, thoughts, Gemini, emotions, the Moon, may need to come out and come out quickly, and that could be a challenge. If you look at the nodal axis, but also the ascendant, which ironically joins in along with the descendant, connecting very closely to the nodal axis, means that we do have an event where the 4 points of mutability, the Moon, Gemini, the ascendant, the South Node in Virgo, the position of the IC, but also the cluster of energy in Sagittarius, and then we have the collective in Pisces. So all that mutable energy is competing with itself. Not easy at all. And the other intriguing thing is that the Sun in the very gregarious Sagittarius is actually in the 4th house. So it's saying if we do rush anything that's to do with how we feel, about our security, about being protective, that's not going to be a wise thing at all. So if we have a flirty encounter, for example, entirely possible with Venus in Sagittarius through to the 24th of December, and still in touch with Pluto, so we can have some very profound conversations, but generally Venus in the sign of Sagittarius, not so much interested in bonding, it's more about enjoying and perhaps moving on, maintaining its independence. So we have the sign of independence and freedom, Sagittarius, with all those players in the 4th house. How contradictory is that? Because that's the flavour of the moon. So if we are too impatient around family matters, about who's going to go where over Christmas, or we're thinking about changing where we live in a practical, physical way, if we rush the process without understanding the information that could be exchanged, that isn't necessarily going to be a good thing. Now, full moons, of course, create a lot of intensity, for good or bad. You know, full moons can be positive, they can be more challenging. But I think generally we are given, or we absorb and consume, an enormous amount of data these days, and I think this is a full moon in a way which reminds us that we perhaps need to be a bit more selective. You know, if we try to consume too much, it leaves us feeling rather adrenal, and it's hard to sort of keep out the influences that are competing for that attention. So at times it is perhaps a good thing for us to be more selective, turn our phones off, and have some moments of peace and relaxation, which of course the moon will really appreciate. But that relaxation and peace doesn't have to be boring, so if we use the more stimulating energies of the moon to inform our emotions, it could be about reading about something to do with personal development, or if you enjoy it, quiz books, puzzles, crosswords. If you're someone who loves chess and finds that convivial with someone, what a great way to use this lovely Gemini moon. But it does have its challenges if we don't stay in touch with our instincts, and that's really the underlying message of the next few weeks. And just know, because the very testing right angle that's come in between Mars and Saturn, followed by the Sun and Saturn, then Venus and Saturn, and then they're all going to clash with Neptune. Generally for us all, there's going to be an amplification of emotion. Things can take on a life force of their own right through to around about the 24th of December, just before Christmas, and that can make us really wound up at times. So that's why we may need to just spin out, cocoon ourselves away, very moon in Cancer if you like, to just keep back some of that energy that can be so frenetic these days, and just give ourselves moments to recharge, have some peace, and then re-engage in the festivities the best we can. So just be aware there's only so much we can pack in, but that Sagittarius energy is greedy for more action, but the moon is just asking us to be mindful of how much we're talking to others, what we're discussing, the quality of it, and the node is asking us to always listen to our instincts. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 signs. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for next year, you can do so now. Get the rest of this year 3. But also you'll get my life roadmap report, which will give you searing insights in terms of the life patterns that have played out so far for you, and working with your forecast will help you to time your moves in the months ahead the best you can. 30% off. You also get my free gift of your general love Chinese and Indian written zodiac forecast for the new year. So Aries, the full moon for you sees your ruler Mars along with the Sun and Venus in the free-spirited independent sign of Sagittarius. We always have to be mindful of your ruler, and that's giving you a lot of desire to be free, independent, and that could be what you're thinking and your conversation is about. So if people want you to go to a particular destination over Christmas, however much it may have its attractions, there may be another part of you that wants to do your own thing, perhaps go somewhere completely different, be much more spontaneous. So that could be a tension. There may also be something that you find yourself thinking about or talking about over the next couple of weeks, which is linked to the past. If there is legacy issues, and we mostly have them, to do with an old relationship, it doesn't have to be active now, that could come up if you feel that someone's not being very fair, or you're hearing, perhaps through social media, comments, maybe digs, that can be rather aggravating and possibly even triggering because Mars is clashing with Saturn. So your patience could be tested as well. If you're talking to siblings, for example, the third house, or even neighbours, and you're having some dialogue about arrangements, and if people are perhaps bringing up old issues unfairly, that too could be something that's rather annoying. But the energy of Sagittarius could see you choose to try to crush any rebellion or dissent in a very assertive way. Totally understandable, but you might want to use a bit more stealth, and that can come through Mercury. Mercury in Scorpio suggests a little bit of subtlety. You can make the same point but just use different language. And if we think Gemini is about the words, whether it's text or verbal, the ruler of the sign is just asking to just consider what the ramifications could be if someone does prove to be somewhat frustrating. But if you do find yourself just wanting to have a much freer, much more spontaneous run up to Christmas, doing your own thing a little bit more, going off for Christmas shopping with a friend to a place you wouldn't normally go to, or perhaps flying off to somewhere and not spending Christmas in the traditional way you would, none of that would be a surprise. So it's just down to making sure that who you're conversing with or communicating the message to, you do so with a little bit of patience in the mix, and just be conscious that with the position of the North Node and Saturn and Neptune all in your psychological part of your chart, they're all linking into your language, which could at times be informed in a way which isn't readily obvious. So just bear that in mind, be as mindful as you can over the next 2 weeks, and it will help you to deal with this potential very bubbly full moon, but also one that does have some test as well. Please check out your year 2026 deep dive video by clicking on the link beneath this one. So Taurus, for you, this particular full moon represents a second house, 8th house opposition. That polarity very much about everyday finance, the position of the moon, Sun, the 8th house, long-term finance, but also that we share with others. But for you personally, you have a real ace, because Mercury, the ruler of the sign of Gemini, is in a very constructive location, sharpening up your listening skills, but also adding to your depth of perception in Scorpio, but linking fabulously well to Saturn. That's really helpful. So if you are talking about a contract, trying to sort out who contributes and does what, perhaps for Christmas, or around a business situation, that very stable link between Mercury and Saturn can help you to get an outcome that works good for your future. What might not work quite so well is the fact that the North Node is in the part of your chart that's very idealistic. And if your view of a situation doesn't chime so well with someone else, and it's really difficult to marry the fact that your values just aren't aligning, that may be something, particularly in a relationship that's been going on for some while, it could be something that does have a bearing for the run up to Christmas, because the collective in Sagittarius is going to be clashing. It's already starting with Mars and Saturn, but it is going to be clashing right through to the 24th of December. So if you want something different in a long-term relationship to someone that you're nominally devoted and invested and connected to, and really that isn't quite working for either of you in some ways, perhaps you feel they're rather possessive, perhaps they resent you going out with your friends, socialising, perhaps it is around the long-term finances that things are a bit tense, or it's around a business situation where you just don't have the same kind of credo, those issues may show up in the conversations you have, very Gemini moon, over the next couple of weeks. But you do have with Mercury in Scorpio in your 7th house, and that link to Saturn, an opportunity with some application and some patience to find solutions where a solution can be had. But if you are linking to someone at the moment where you're just not really getting each other, it may show up quite powerfully as I say, in the festive world. Please check out your year 2026 deep dive video by clicking on the link beneath this one. So Gemini, for you, this particular full moon is very much about relationships, but not necessarily just personal relationships. With a cluster of energy in the sign of Pisces, including the mighty but stern Saturn, if there is a tie you're involved in where there's a little bit of a battle for dominance, maybe with a line manager, could be a boss, maybe someone who works for you, that could show up over the next 2 or 3 weeks in a very potent way indeed, because in the run up to Christmas Eve we're going to have first Mars current clashing with Saturn, then the Sun, then Venus, but also we're going to have them also go into a right angle with Neptune. And Saturn and Neptune, along with the North Node, are in the most visible part of your situation. And here they can see you having a lot of responsibilities or dealing with very demanding people, not feeling there's a lot of acknowledgement for what you're putting in. And if you are someone who's really leaning into the needs of others, whether it is around the Christmas arrangements, your parents or older relatives, or a partner, that can create quite a lot of frustration. But what are the opportunities? Because there is one, particularly because your ruler Mercury is forging an ace link with Saturn. So as much Mars and Saturn are not on the best of terms, which can create aberration, frustration, exasperation, if we don't see things go as quickly as we like, what Mercury can do is just ask you to see the detail in situations, be a bit more detached actually, because its link to Saturn suggests a conversation you have, and obviously Gemini full moons can be about conversations, could be around a contract, could see something being baked in for you that's actually very positive. And the energy in that very visible part of your chart in Pisces may be because you need to interact with some very important people over the next couple of weeks. So your choice of words, your language and your tone will be important. But if you are in a romantic tie where you do feel that the other person seems to want to always be dominant and on top, and that's a bit frustrating, maybe you need to set your boundaries a bit firmer. But Mars can help you to do that at the present time, but it may lead to a tense standoff in order to get the outcome you really need. Please check out your year 2026 deep dive video by clicking on the link beneath this one. Cancer, for you, each lunation is hugely important because the moon is your ruling planet. But in the 12th house, from a solar perspective, that's very tender, can be very much to do with the spiritual dimension, healing, but also our fears, our subconscious anxieties. And the sensitivity of the moon is challenged by the practicality of the sun, not just because the sun is in the brusque Sagittarius, but also because Mars is there. And Mars has been pushing you recently to be more industrious, perhaps even be a little more virtuous, and you may have done that. It's just that Mars is now applying to Saturn in the part of your situation which is to do with your personal freedoms. So if there is a situation you're in at the moment which is draining your energy, it may be you're trying to be a little too virtuous, you're working too hard, you're not giving yourself enough time to unwind, relax, and be in touch with that more psychological dimension of your nature, which does require space, time, gentleness, nurture. That's what the moon's about, protectiveness. So the moon's asking you to withdraw a little bit at a time when the sun, but particularly Mars, are pushing you in a way to be more physically rugged, and the two don't quite marry. And in the mix as well, we have the North Node in the T-square, along with the South Node, the grand mutable cross with the moon and the sun. And along with Saturn and Neptune, the North Node's asking you to be in touch with your higher values, a kind of Sagittarius echo really. And of course you do have the ruler of Sagittarius, Jupiter, in your sign, if in retrograde. And Jupiter is actually forging a very strong link to Saturn and also Mercury, the ruler of the sign of Gemini. So that's very helpful to you on this event. So it may mean, because Jupiter for you is giving you a lot of encouragement to take the lead. Mercury's in a very creative area, so your connections to people who share your values could strengthen. So if there are those who can help you to delegate a little bit, provide some support, perhaps around childcare, or if you can get people within your home to take a bit more responsibility for the domestic load, very much the 6th house, that can feed into your need for a little bit of space, the energy in Pisces. But just know, in the run-up to Christmas, I feel that if you are doing something, your life structure is not giving you much space for yourself, it may reach a little bit of a tender point. The other thing that can happen with a 12th, 6th house full moon is anything to do with your work, perhaps where you're not getting on so well with people. There may be some criticisms of you by colleagues, but they may not necessarily be expressed in an upfront and out there way. So there could be some office politics that also show up in the next 2 weeks too. But if you can use the creativity of Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, in your personal 5th house in a way which works for your soul values, very much your moon energy, that can be very helpful to you over the next couple of weeks. But I think if you are feeling a bit exhausted, drained, run down, got some migraines or headaches, or even a bit cheesed off, try to find some ways to moderate your daily routines at what can be a very busy and demanding part of the year. But if someone here and there can do their bit more to help, that's something that's very positive that can come from this particular full moon for you. Please check out your year 2026 deep dive video by clicking on the link beneath this one. So Leo, we all know we can't please all of the people all of the time. But what about if you go on a hot streak where your personality power and natural charisma is burnished to such a degree that it may be some of your friends who are a little bit green-eyed about the attention that you're receiving, because that's possible for you over these next 2 weeks. It's also possible that you could find yourself in a situation where someone's very enticing from a romantic, intimate viewpoint, but are they truly right for you? Is there going to be a catch, a gotcha? And also in a long-term relationship, if you are wanting to get out and enjoy the Christmas whirl, is a partner inclined to be a little bit controlling or jealous or possessive? Because that can show up too. The energy of the moon in Gemini could ask you to think about your long-term future, and also the question, are you expressing your creative talents and flair and artistry in a way which really works for your long-term future? That is possible, but I think on the whole you are going to have to juggle your time, because a lot of people could want a piece of you over the next couple of weeks, but there could be that person who finds it more difficult about how much energy you're drawing towards you. But it can, for you personally, be a time when your talent for connecting to people, having playful and fun encounters, is definitely going to be maximised. Please check out your year 2026 deep dive video by clicking on the link beneath this one. So Virgo, for you, the position of the moon is very visible, so that can be more difficult to disguise how we feel. Do you know when you have those days where we kind of feel that everyone who looks at us knows what we're thinking? Of course they don't. People who are very perceptive might pick up if we're perhaps a little bit unhappy or sad, or if we're particularly jolly. But for the most part, people are going about their days and don't notice so much. But over the next 2 weeks, you may feel that your emotions are amplified. And the reason for that is the gathering of players in Sagittarius, your 4th house, can be ventilated by the more visible location of the articulate moon in Gemini, in the most visible part of your chart. But is there something about your home and emotional world which is a little bit out of balance? Are you giving your professional situation as much attention as you would like? Or at work, is the environment, the energy, the atmosphere quite as as good as you would like it to be, because if it isn't, with Mars already moving into a crunching right angle with Saturn and with the Sun and Venus to come, your relationships, whether they're in a personal context with family members or to do with colleagues, getting that balance between what you give and get, but particularly work-life balance, might be a little bit challenging. So there's someone around you who tends to be a bit cool, not very encouraging, rather critical, not understanding your personal circumstances at the moment, especially if you've got young children or older parent who needs a lot of support. That could be something that gets in the way of relationships. But that doesn't mean to say you shouldn't continue to welcome the chance to bake in the more nurturing part of your situation in the run up to Christmas. But just know, as we do get to Christmas, a much more playful, gregarious, fun and charismatic time awaits you for the last 10 days of 2025. It's just over this couple of weeks, if something is a little bit out of kilter with work, home, emotions, you may need to try and address it. Please check out your year 2026 deep dive video by clicking on the link beneath this one. So Libra, because the position of the moon is in your personal 9th house, that reflects some of the energy of Sagittarius, which can be your philosophies, it can be your desire to bring some spontaneity, variety and freedom into your situation, whereas the players in Sagittarius, including your ruler, very much about your daily life experience. Now, the combination of having Venus along with Mars in your 3rd house could give you a little bit more confidence about expressing your ideas. So if you do find yourself in some kind of debate, which could be possible, you're going to have both the charm and subtlety with Venus, but also a little more assertion with Mars. But when it comes to professional conversations, because Mars is squaring off to Saturn, which is increasing in its intensity on this event and will pick up power, I think if you have been doing a lot for others, especially at work, and you're not feeling that people appreciate that, you will want to use this full moon to get your message across even more succinctly, and particularly if it's about money. And with Mercury being in Scorpio, the 2nd house for you, that's a great position to be talking about your finances, and its link to Saturn can give you a crispness, a realism in your approach. So if you do need to say something, not only can you be eloquent and persuasive and passionate on the full moon, you can also be very precise and get that idea across in a way which sounds realistic and that other people will engage with. But if you have been thinking about getting more active, perhaps being a little bit freer of some of those responsibilities that have been so profoundly to the fore over the last couple of years, a change can definitely be as good as a rest. And whether it is over the festivities or over the next few weeks, if you can just change up your daily routines and bring some new and fresh ideas into the mix, that's a very smart thing to do. Please check out your year 2026 deep dive video by clicking on the link beneath this one. So Scorpio, when we think about the archetypes for each zodiac sign, it's always important to remember that each of us has our own unique celestial blueprint, our natal chart. But broadly for Scorpios, if you're very connected to a situation, your commitment can be total and therefore all in. But there will always be situations where we were all in doesn't work for us anymore, and we're withdrawing to become all out. And this full moon could tease up a situation where that kind of process is unfolding for you. Because the moon for you in house 8, although it's in the Aries Gemini, house 8 is a kind of echo of the energy of Scorpio. So it could be a deep change that's going on. Now, because of the 2nd 8th house axis between the energy of Sagittarius 2nd and the moon 8th, if you are really enjoying a close relationship with someone and it has a good intimate connection, well, that relationship can just get stronger. Why not? But if you're not enjoying something, or finances or a different set of values are coming up, the fact that Mars, your traditional ruler, is beginning to apply to Saturn, the planet of limitation, in a very powerful way. And along with Neptune through to the middle of the month, that can create complexities around your love life if you're not feeling it as much as you had felt it before. Now, we all know that this can be a very expensive time of the year, but one of the things you could do in a very positive way is use Mercury in your sign and its very strong link to Saturn in Pisces to really analyse what you want to spend, stick to it, keep your boundaries there. The other thing that can happen with second, 8th house energy is where we might be too attached. Is there something that you're drawn to, or a particular lifestyle choice that actually isn't very good for you? Because this full moon can ask you to think about whether it has become almost an obsession, and maybe you need to try to break that. We all have some kind of crux, don't we? My late night chocolate, for example. But sometimes those things, if we have them to excess, aren't so good for us. So that's the type of things you might consider, where you're finding something very compelling or someone very compelling, and that isn't so good for you if it's too much in the wrong kind of way. So the totality of being in and out could show up over the next couple of weeks in all sorts of ways. Please check out your year 2026 deep dive video by clicking on the link beneath this one. So Sagittarius, this is a full moon which occurs for you in house 7. The moon in the 7th house can be actually really constructive. It gives us a much greater desire to have harmony in our relationships, but it doesn't change the fact that when the moon and the sun are in opposition, finding the balance between what you want as an individual, the energy of Sagittarius, especially with Mars in residence at the moment, may be a bit more of a tough hoe. But you do have your ruler Jupiter in the part of your situation, the 8th house, which can be about transformation. So if you've been working very hard on trying to improve your finances, the link between Jupiter and Mercury, what you've been doing behind the scenes, the 12th house, and also linking back to Saturn, the industry you've been showing, but perhaps to try and create a more secure future for yourself. If you've been really putting the hours in and concentrating on that, it may feel to someone else that they're a little neglected. So the moon's calling out to you to just turn up the diplomacy a little bit, be a bit more conscious that even if you're doing it as you see it for their benefit, you do need to be inclusive for how they're feeling. But with Mars in your sign, applying in a very challenging way to Saturn and then Neptune by the middle of December, just be conscious that what you want as an individual, you can't rush it. Someone might want something a little different, but could also be feeling very sensitive at the moment. So that part of you that can be very brusque, to the point and honest, that may seem a little bit difficult for the other person to deal with. So that's where the diplomacy of the moon in house 7 for you can be such an asset. So the more sensitive you are and the more you use your language, Gemini, in a careful way, the better it can be. Please check out your year 2026 deep dive video by clicking on the link beneath this one. So Capricorn, you may pride yourself on your everyday routines running very efficiently and metronomically, because if any part of those could be a little tighter and more ordered, this is a full moon which encourages you to do it. But we know this can be a very demanding, busy and wearing time of the year. There's so many celestial plates to spin, and it's hard to make sure that we don't drop any of them. But just be conscious that Mars in your 12th house, along with the Sun and Venus, is coming into a crunching right angle with your ruler Saturn. And in fact, that is going to go on along with a square to Neptune through to the middle of December. If something's been bubbling away in the depths, it might be to do with your work, and it needs to come into the open and be released. It probably will do so by the middle, if not the 3rd week of December. And that might not be particularly easy to get through. But you know, sometimes in life, if things change, they change for a reason. and what doesn't work out for you could release you to do something that works much better for you. And later in December, as the arrival of Mars on the 15th, the Sun on the 21st and Venus on the 24th, the period between Christmas and the New Year is going to give you a wonderful platform to relaunch into the New Year in sparkling style, but much more in touch with the individual qualities and characteristics that are right for you. So if you have got responsibilities and obligations at the moment which are dragging you down a little bit, I think there is an option for a release and a new start as the month goes on. Please check out your year 2026 deep dive video by clicking on the link beneath this one. So Aquarius, this full moon occurs in your sister air sign of Gemini. The fifth house can be very warm and affectionate and playful, perfect for this time of year. But the big picture, very Sagittarius, is much more about your future. And here you have the planet of charm and diplomacy, Venus, the Sun itself, of course, but also the thrust and desire of Mars. And that gathering of energy there is very illustrative, because if that future direction of yours is enabling you to showcase your uniqueness, which is often a big part of Aquarius energy, but also your talent and flair, the moon in Gemini, well, all good and dandy. And because Mercury is in a very elevated part of your chart, forging a superb angle to your traditional ruler of Saturn, if you are having conversations, very Gemini, and it is about that future, and you do need to talk to influential people, you could structure your ideas with aplomb. What's not to like? Well, it's just that Mars is in a very challenging, or applying to a very challenging angle to Saturn, your traditional ruler. And if your values are not being met or celebrated in the way you want, well, you've got people around you in your friendships that aren't really seeming to be in step with that future direction. The weaknesses like that could show up a little bit more. It won't be until the end of December when that becomes much more obvious, I feel. And through the period from Christmas to the New Year, you may find yourself wanting to retreat a little bit. But if you do want to get into the festive world, you can have a lot of fun. You certainly can do that with this particular full moon. But if that direction of travel is working well and you feel like you can be yourself, that's brilliant. But if it doesn't feel you can be yourself, or you don't feel valued by the people you're connecting to, particularly friends, that can show up too on this year's particular Gemini full moon. Please check out your year 2026 deep dive video by clicking on the link beneath this one. So Pisces, this is a full moon which could ask you to push outside your comfort zone over the next couple of weeks. Maybe it's in terms of social interaction, with being invited to some functions. Maybe it's to do with getting together with certain members of your family group which you find challenging, or perhaps it is around your professional hopes, because if you are really clear in terms of your big ambitions, there's a wonderful chance at the moment to step forwards with confidence and self-assurance. It's just the moon's in a more sheltered, tender location. What's going to help you tremendously, however, is that Jupiter, your traditional ruler, is linking backwards to Saturn in your sign. Now, Saturn has been demanding over the last couple of years, but Jupiter's providing some levitation and some lightness to Saturn's structure. And then Mercury, the planet of communication, is in a very expansive part of your chart. So thinking about situations in a new way, but making sure you do showcase your warmth. That's really critical. That can grab people's attention more than anything. So if you are feeling a little bit nervous about a big event over the next few weeks, or someone you have to meet, have maximum self-confidence, and the few moments of tremulousness that you may experience, you can get through that, and you have got a very helpful planetary landscape in order to support you. Please check out your year 2026 deep dive video by clicking on the link beneath this one.